I'm Deb, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about our brain. So, in another video, we discussed the four different parts of our brain and some of the primary functions of those parts. And it's a little intimidating to think about how the brain and how it works because some of us are not neuroscientists who specialize in studying the brain, but we can learn some of the basic aspects of the functionings of those parts of the brain and how those ones relate to our mindfulness practice and basically our daily life and the behaviors that we have and the thoughts and feelings that we have in relation to what's happening in the brain. So, like I had said before, this really helped me when I was learning about the brain and understanding myself and why I did the things I did and felt the way I felt, legitimate reasons for it because of what was happening in my brain. This really helped me. So, I'm going to share a little bit more. And from this lesson, maybe you can add to it and bring to mind in your family or among your roommates to quiz each other and to say, okay, hang on, what am I tending to when I'm tending my brain in this aspect of my life or in this activity that I'm doing? So, first of all, we will review by saying that prefrontal cortex is the executive function, that management part of our brain that separates us from our pet or basically all other animals and mammals is this prefrontal cortex. This is very developed in human beings. And Dr. Daniel Siegel's handy brain model is an example of the brain. So it's like a model. So this is your prefrontal cortex. And here, if this was your head and your neck, this is your prefrontal cortex. And then behind there is the amygdala. Amygdala is the emotional center of the brain. So when we get emotional, whether it's stressed or frustrated or angry or fearful or even the excitable and positive emotions, that's from the amygdala. And behind the amygdala is the hippocampus, and it's in there too. And this is a small part of the brain that does a very big job, and this is our memory bank. And when we calm the amygdala, emotions, with our prefrontal cortex managing those emotions, the hippocampus has a clear way to function, and that is remembering the things we learn and study and listen to. And then we're able to recall that information. So if you're sometimes suffering from a bad memory or a short-term memory, then we can say, how can I calm my system when I'm learning, while I'm listening, so that my hippocampus can really function at its best? The other part, the fourth part of the brain that we learn in the mindful movement program is the cerebellum. And that is sort of like over here on the sides. And this is in charge of our mobility. So the movement of our lips when we're talking, or the movement of our balance and body and legs when we're standing up in yoga in tree pose, or in any way we move. When we're using our cerebellum primarily, this is walking and physical movement. And mindful movement and mindful walking they are a very big part, important part of our mindfulness practice. So those are the four: the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the cerebellum. So if you wanted to tend to a particular area of your brain in a day and you set an intention, I want to really tend to my prefrontal cortex today, then what could you do? So I happen to have a quiz here for you. So if you were to notice that maybe somebody you were talking to happened to be gossiping or saying something mean to someone, and you brought your prefrontal cortex online, and instead of getting emotional about it, you thought to yourself, how best to manage this conversation. And maybe you change the subject. Maybe you take a breath and distance yourself from that conversation so that you can then choose something more uplifting to talk about, or talk about that person in a more positive and respectful way. That's using your prefrontal cortex. You're actually intending to use a particular part of your brain. Pretty amazing. And when you consciously practice that, that part of the brain gets better and better skilled at that behavior. So if you were to practice using your hippocampus memory bank in a very effective and efficient way, and you had to study for a test or you had to learn something new for your job, then you might take 3 long breaths, letting go of anything that was really stressing you out, just letting go, being in the present moment, noticing your breathing before you then started studying or reading about that which you had to learn. So that would be tending to your hippocampus. So a way you could tend to your amygdala so that you are a master of your mind, and so that the amygdala, that emotional center, is not mastering you, then how could you practice that? Well, when you feel yourself getting emotionally charged, particularly stressed, you feel yourself getting frustrated or mad or angry or really scared, notice yourself. That's the tricky part. It just takes practice. And then start those 3 calming breaths, or go for a walk, or maybe it's more than 3 calming breaths, but breathing and noticing yourself in the present moment, maybe noticing the temperature had risen in the body with the stress hormone running, and calming that stress down. That would be a way of managing, using your prefrontal cortex, managing your amygdala. A way to practice using your cerebellum and really functioning that cerebellum very well is a mindful movement. Maybe it's just moving in a way that strengthens you, or maybe it's doing the wave. The wave in mindful movement is we start with thank you, we thank ourselves, we reach for the sun and we're open to everything that's good today. We let go, we fold forward, and we just let go of anything that's not really serving us right now and it's stressing us out. Just releasing that and letting be all that is. And then we reach for the sun again, now that we're a little bit more stress released, and we thank ourselves for taking that moment to be healthy in our body and our mind. So that's the wave. Maybe you would do some yoga, and maybe you could practice a couple of yoga moves, or breathing through yoga every morning, or maybe right before bed, or in the midday when you have some time. So that would be enhancing and promoting practice and effectivity in your cerebellum. Another way that is a fun reminder to help you remember to really tend to your brain is by seeing your brain like a garden. And I don't know if any of you are keeping a little bit of a vegetable garden right now, because we have time and we're at home and it's fun to grow our own vegetables or plants. If you plant 4 groups of seeds or maybe sprouts, and one represents your prefrontal cortex, and one group of seeds represents your cerebellum, and one group of seeds represents your amygdala, and one group of seeds represents your hippocampus. And every day you tend to that garden, your brain garden, and you watch as we water, like studying calmly, and tend to those aspects of our brain garden. And that's a real beautiful example or metaphor for tending to our own brains. And so if you haven't really consciously tended to a particular part of your brain before, maybe this will help you think of this, and you'll have reasons to feel really proud of those aspects of your brain. And instead of complaining about, oh, my poor memory, or my terrible balance, or, oh, I'm kind of hot-headed, I lose my temper, you can start being really proud of how you tend to those aspects of your brain, and then notice when they are improving, because they will with practice, just like everything else. Anyways, you just have a great day, and I'll see you next time.